what we'd like to do now is just, again, have you think about what you heard. Think about how you felt as you were listening, and please, you can open your cameras and we can just open for questions. And then we'll take a musical break and then come back and talk again. So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand or just open your mic and ask your question, please. And again, thank you to the interpreters and thank you to everyone who's here in the audience, so to speak. And we want to hear from you. So please, what are your ideas? And first of all, what do you think about what you heard? Do you have any questions?
Something that came up for me during what I heard was that I'm so happy to actually see different generations or different, different stages of feminism, being feminist in this panel, because that is always really inspiring for me. And that kind of makes me feel like I can really learn from experiences that my feminist sisters have made before, but also that there is a stage for us young or relatively young starting out feminists to speak and to share our experiences and to really see that all different experiences are so valuable and so important for this. And I think it reminded me of something that one of the speakers yesterday mentioned. I don't know if I can get it like completely right, but she was speaking about the concept of stewardship instead of ownership. So in the sense that we are a continuum of women or people fighting for these issues, and it's not been successfully done and like completely done in the past, but we're still doing it, and the future generations will also do it. And I think that is really beautiful and gives me a lot of hope. So thank you.
Thank you, Carla, for that. And that idea of stewardship, as Fui talked about yesterday, is that we don't own land, we don't own ideas, nobody owns those things, but rather we have those things and we are to take care of those things, whether it's the land, the water, be careful with one another, steward each other, as well as our natural resources. And that's a very profound counter-capitalist idea. Because capitalism, you're supposed to own everything, and whoever owns the most is the most powerful. So the idea of stewardship actually goes completely against it. And I love it too, Carla. And I also love the intergenerational panel that we were able to pull together. Other comments, please? Reactions? Jessica has a comment in the chat that says it's hard for married women to unite.
I think one of the points that Shebana made that resonated with me is that we actually need to find ways to support the economic survival of young feminists. So one of the things that I was recalling when I was at university, I worked 2 part-time jobs and went to university and then was an activist on top of that. But this was the late 80s. And I had a full-time job before I went back to university. And in those days, it was so easy to get work. I could go work as a waitress or in McDonald's or could, take care of someone's child or something, childcare, all of those opportunities is like, okay, I'll learn how to do this because it pays the rent. But now we're in a situation where going out to work is actually almost impossible in some places, especially when there is a huge COVID there's a huge gap in terms of access to vaccines, to PPE, to medications, to treatments, that going out to work, the work that I did when I was much younger, to be able to kind of fund my activism, my volunteer activism, doing that is actually almost like a death sentence in some places. So I think we need to consider that. And now that we're doing a lot of online training, we've been quite careful to ensure that grassroots activists, especially women, are compensated for, at least we call it a digital access allowance or whatever, but basically we are actually trying to give them some compensation that would at least cover the cost of lunch and electricity and internet connection. So, if possible, because this is a burden. The Zoomification of activism is exciting because it connects us so easily, but also we have to consider that someone entering the space without a paid job or without job security is basically giving up their opportunity to do work, to pay the rent. So I think we need to recognize, we cannot assume that young women, young activists, young women and men, but also specifically women, will have the financial means to be active. We cannot assume that, and we need to find ways. Yeah, Olin says Zoom labor. Yeah, I think we need to think quite strategically and intentionally about this.
Just to connect what you said, Debbie, of supporting, activists, I'm thinking about Fatmeh's work, which is something called the Maintenance Fund, that really supports families and, tries to support families in a very basic way. So even just family survival, right, which is aligned with activist survival. And maybe Fatmeh, you can just explain just a little bit about what the maintenance fund is. And then there's a comment in the chats about what do you mean not using master's tools. And then Shebana, I'll come back to you. I saw your hand was raised. So I saw you, but let me continue with this thought and then I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Okay, with pleasure. I would like to talk about the maintenance fund. Maintenance fund is a state association, which means that it was established by decree, by law. It has independent financial and administrative independence. It seeks to prevail justice through providing protection and accountability. Protection to persons who are entitled to get maintenance through the rulings of courts, but that were not implemented, and the beneficiaries that get this maintenance are families in general, especially women-led families. So, and beneficiaries are children, abandoned women, and a mother and a father who are poor and don't have the means to provide for their children per law. In addition to persons with disabilities who cannot work. So they should be provided by those who can help from their own inheritance. So because families sometimes deprive persons with disabilities from their inheritance, we seek to provide the basic. We don't seek to provide only basic services. We try to provide health, education, and accommodation services. We, as an association, when we started to provide these services to these categories, we were shocked to discover that these are abandoned categories and that are not provided to by any other governmental or civil society organizations, because the person who is responsible for these categories is there, like the father or the mother, and that the father and mother have a family or children that they can provide to. So according to our knowledge and recognition of these abandoned categories, we've developed our programs and our services in order to empower these categories on more than one level. So we have now economic empowerment program. This is a program that is specialized in providing better health circumstances. Also, we promoted the rights in health services and social services. Our partnerships were based on the approaches of our beneficiaries. And I would like also to tell you that we don't only provide services to these categories, we also hold accountable those who were entitled by the law to provide, and we take we help to take all needed procedures, like seize their financial sources and to regain the rights of these people in order to prevail justice. Many beneficiaries from this fund believe that this is just repaying for their dignity, because we only protected and defended their right. To them, it was like, it wasn't about money, it was about that they regained their dignity. And I'd like to give you an idea about how we build our strategies. One time we were in a group with one of the beneficiaries group, and we asked them what were their needs in order to develop our program. And one of them raised her hand, and she said she would like to have and I asked her why she needed to have an operation in her eye, and she said, and I asked her why, and I asked her why do you need this, and she was used to live in Saudi with her husband, and she used to be abused by her husband, and last time she was returned to country because her husband bit her in her eye. Imagine this level of violence. So immediately, and her eye almost was out of place, and immediately after this meeting, so it was her cornea, she needed to have a cornea replacement. I communicated with our ambassador there, and now we are able to even outreach to those who are out of this justice circle. We've developed a plan about how to communicate with those who leave their families here in Palestine and they live abroad unprovided. So this was an example of how we develop our programs, policies, and services. And I'm proud to say that we, as a maintenance fund, we're the pioneering association in this regard. We wanted to learn from Tunisia experience. Now they learn from us, and same goes for and applies to Lebanon and Algiers. They're now looking up to us because we believe that it is the duty of a state, and as a state's organization, we should defend this right, we should acknowledge this right, and we should protect these vulnerables, because this will make a change in their lives. One of the children, 11-year-old child, who refused completely to continue his studies because he wanted to help out his mother in providing for his siblings, so he wanted to work. So 2 years after we helped out, he told his mother that I feel that the maintenance fund is our father. And so in the programs we offer, we change lots of concepts, visions. Some women now are empowered with some professions that they have. We empower them in every way possible. They get their rights, they get their financial rights to her own bank account, or their as women accounts. And our income usually is we usually, so the first at the beginning of the corona crisis, our income totally stopped because we receive our incomes from the certificates, marriage certificates, and when they're stamped in the court. So now every month we are taking out an amount of our income just to provide to transfer to dollars. So we around one about $155,000, $150,000 we help with families on monthly basis. So this is what we talk about. This is a basic thing, and in this we also we strive to maintain preserve their dignity and not to be violated either by domestically or by Israelis. What
Great.
I mean by
Thank
the
you.
master
Oh.
issue, by the master issue.
Okay. Quickly, because
Master.
we have other ideas. Yeah, please.
Okay, as for what I meant by master is the system, the patriarchal system. It is the master. And we regretfully, up till this day, we still use these patriarchal tools. Just so we need to work on changing this system, this patriarchal system, and that's why we need to change our ideology, our information, and to be creative in coming up with new tools and approaches. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Not many people are familiar with the maintenance fund, so it's important to have the basic idea of what that is in Palestine. And as Fatmeh said, it's quite a radical development that happened quite a few years ago, and it's always a struggle to keep it going. But Fatmeh and her colleagues have done a great job. So Shebana, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to what Debbie said. Debbie mentioned about how we could provide support for young feminists or young activists. I think it is even double of the problem during a pandemic. A lot of people are losing jobs, and now all of our work are from home, online, and we do the housework. We have responsibilities at home. Some have children, and now they do it all at the same time. Sometimes while you're in a meeting, you're cooking and all that. It's very difficult to balance the time that you spend working and doing housework maybe. And I was just really wondering, how could we, like, how can we find an intersection between our practical needs and our strategic interests as women? How can we put them all together and connect them in a way that we could provide for both? I think it's very difficult during this time. I don't know if it's just us, because pandemic is really worsening every day here in our country. And then maybe just for a question for Fatmeh, how do we sustain the support for Palestine? It's also very difficult because every day there are new news all over the world, sometimes in our country, a lot of distractions. But how do we sustain that support? And what else could we do to help our sisters in Palestine?
Yeah, and before we move there, there's an important question that's in the chat, so I want to address it. And this is from Jessica Hobb. She said this is Google Translate, I guess, because she says she doesn't speak very good English, but the first question is sort of, how do women themselves really have to think about relationships between themselves? And she gave the example of you know, when their husbands cheat, they gossip with each other, but, you know, it's really hard to address that. And instead of dealing with the source of the problem, women are fighting with each other, you know, about the husband or man who they're fighting with. That's an interesting interpersonal and a political question. The other question from mainland China is, what do you think about the idea that
Both men, both
both
men.
men and women, both men and women are victims in a patriarchal society? In other words, in what ways are men victimized as well as women, right? We speak more about women's victimization, but we don't speak very much about the ways in which men are dehumanized or victimized. And the question related to that is, how should the feminist movement unite the strength of men? So any of our panelists can open to that question, and we will come back to the question of how to support Palestine, because that's an important agenda, I think, for us as feminists. So what about this question of men, you know, women fighting other women over men, or, you know, thinking about men's dehumanization because of patriarchy? Shebana.
Just a couple of months ago in the Philippines, our organization decided to create a forum. We organized a forum to have men discuss masculinity through poetry, and how can we make how can we understand critical studies of men and masculinity and move towards caring masculinity, right, rather than the usual toxic, hegemonic, and hyper masculinity. And it was a very contentious issue during that time, that a lot of some feminists said that, why are you giving space for men to discuss these things? They should make their spaces more they should convert their spaces instead of us giving them space. But we truly believe that in order for us to transform men, make them our allies, we need to involve them. We need to start having that discussion with men. Let's unpack masculinity. Let's analyze and criticize and study it, so we know how to go about it. And even in our work, like for SRHR, we are starting to include men, not just as participants, as respondents, but also to get their opinion. Because one, we need to acknowledge that men aren't the problem. They're not our enemies, but patriarchy is. And somehow you are right, whoever asked the question. Men are also victims of patriarchy, in a sense that they need to fit into that box, that you need to be strong to be a man. You shouldn't cry. You should be tough, and so on. These are things that our culture propagated, and they are also victims in that sense that they had to follow those norms and stereotypes. That's it. Thank you.
This is a very contentious topic, you know, in various women's movement spaces. So if other people have opinions about that, that would be great. It's patriarchy that is the enemy, not necessarily individual men. Anybody have any ideas about that?
Okay, I believe that a man is a victim, just like the woman is and because of the patriarchal system, because being so dominant makes an individual lose many of the values that maybe he had one time. The different status that women and men and women and have puts them in different places. When a person is the one responsible and should look authoritative, they will not express himself in the right way, or the way he officially wants or ordinarily wanted, because and at the end, a man, one way or another, would be affected by oppressing women, even if unconsciously. That's why in our discourse, we need to focus of how much they lose when they oppress us as women. We in the maintenance fund, we work now on the early marriage issues. I did not present, so I did not say that. Of course, there's a 16-year-old girl who got married and became a mother of two. When she applied for the maintenance fund to get some services, she wasn't eligible because she could not provide the needed documents. I could not talk to her directly. I had to communicate with her father, because her father got to know the implications of not letting his daughter finish her studies, and made her or urged her to marry at an early age, and this is now the price for that. So it's important that when a man beats his woman, his wife, we always highlight how much he's a loser in his relationship with her, even so we highlight this. So this is what I wanted just to say, that and solidarity. As for solidarity, I will tackle it later on.
So there's a question about the surveillance and violence against activists in the Philippines under President Duterte, and using COVID and vaccination as another way to squelch dissidents. So that's really important, an example of what we said in the beginning of how the COVID pandemic and in this case, the vaccine is used to suppress political opposition. And I think the Philippines is not the only place that's happening. It's happening in Brazil, as we heard yesterday, and in other places. So that's an important point. Thank you, Ping, for making that point. So other comments? There's a question about you know, single women versus married women and the policies that support one group of people, married women or single women. And so these examples to me have to do with the question, what should be feminists' relationship with the state, right? I think it goes beyond individual bodies and individual interests, but a more political, philosophical question about that, right? In what ways should feminists, if at all, relate to state, and in what ways should women specifically, but feminist movements be autonomous? So that's just a question. Again, Jessica says, you know, she's very pessimistic about how to unite men. I guess we're on a continuum about that. I think it's important to think about these questions also in context, your cultural context, the material context in which you exist, but also thinking across contexts, and is this kind of thing something important for feminist movements to address? Any other questions? Okay, so Fatmeh, there was a specific question about the situation of women and children in the current moment of extreme political repression in Palestine, in Jerusalem, and Gaza, of course, but also maybe you can talk about it in the West Bank in general. What do you want us to know most important about what's happening in this moment that specifically impacts women and children? So maybe you can spend a couple of minutes to talk to us about that.
Thank you very much. So the question is like the difficult, easy question because and there's no ready-made answer, by the way. But what I think of is that we in Palestine we're undergoing um, a stage or phase that is very different than all other phases that Palestinian case has went through. We have this compiled violence, complex violence that is practiced in different multiple ways, and it's even different from one location to another geographically. It's not like there's a we're oppressed by Israel because of our location, our geographic location. And today, whoever has different tools Israel has the most modern ways to really to oppress us and to attack us cognitively and to actually diminish our awareness. It tries to fragment the Palestinian situation and to promote the divisions that we have with geographically or ideological divisions, or even factions divisions. And actually Israel is the one who's pulling the ropes between all these conflicts. I don't know if you know about the political division between the West Bank and Gaza. This is a Palestinian political division, and Palestine, Israel is trying to make use of this division and it tries to reflect it back on the Palestinian society. A while ago, we all stood in awe about the level of violence in the lands that are under the Israeli jurisdiction, which were these lands that were occupied in 1948, and the crime level was so high. The day before yesterday, there was an announcement by the police headquarters that all crimes that took place were crimes that happened by the collaborators that work with Israel, who are brought from Arab collaborators to live in Haifa, Yafa, and all these areas. And this announcement by itself is really big, because Israel now is a stage that it recognizes, it admits that it is responsible for the internal violence one way or another. Violence in Palestine or in the areas that are under the Palestinian jurisdiction. In Jerusalem, it's different type of violence. It's multiple. It touches the social fragrance and the fabric, and it touches the lives of Palestinians. And to address these challenges affects us women and women's access to justice, because women in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem area, who undergoes domestic violence is obliged to go to the Israeli justice system, where she falls into a bigger trap that really fluctuates any sense of stability or justice inside her. At the same time, it promotes patriarchal system that women suffer and endure from. At the same time, women also know that she could fall into this trap by the Israelis, that her children, if she agreed to their systems and their to reveal the or to disclose even the privacy of her household, and Israel can maybe lead them to the use of drugs and so on. So these are games played by the Israeli regime. And Jerusalem women are required to always be aware, to look for information in order to preserve her identity. Even now, everything is now regarded differently.
the things that Israel is doing regarding infrastructure and so on is also taking our identity away from us. So women need to have their awareness updated all the time to maintain their identity and preserve their heritage, their resistance, their knowledge. So to have the Palestinian case should remain the focus of her work. And in West Bank and Gaza, as you know, as you may know, the war that is led by Israel against Gaza, where is Palestinians in especially in Gaza, they're banned to live in security, to live in feeling that they are dignified and a decent life. Every child is subject to death and to accidents, as happens to invasions and air attacks, and they don't know one can make it home or not. They're all threatened on daily basis to be killed. And a while ago, I was about to lose one of my daughters during the attacks that were happening in Sheikh Jarrah, because one of my daughters was painting on a wall in Sheikh Jarrah in an attempt to, she was, I almost lost her in that incident. So same goes for everything that Israel does. It could, separate us and have constant invasions and closures to our human rights organizations under silly excuses, especially organizations that work with prisoners, because they classify them as working with terrorists or under a terrorist work. Health commissions, many of them are closed and it's by Israeli orders. At the same time, and what happened with Nizar Banak, as you may have heard, he is an activist, political activist, who used to express freely his opinion against the Palestinian Authority. I believe that Israel was the main trigger that it allowed the Palestinian apparatus to kill him, and the way he was killed it was really bad. What I asked the world to think of is that the world should learn more about our case, and that this case should always be in mind and to be revived, because we in Palestine in general, as much as we try to convey our messages, the suffering of our people, still we are incapable to do that. Sometimes we are incapable to describe the violations that happen. Can you imagine what does it mean for a house to be demolished? It's not only the walls, it's the memories, it's the whole life, the pictures, the many files that we can be followed up and to be and to communicate more with the organizations in Palestine in order to try to mitigate these violations and Israeli practices. And the biggest support to us is to expose these the Israeli practices against Palestinians to live in dignity and freedom of expression, and to eliminate us from the political map. So it had exceeded the issue of land. It's beyond this. In Sheikh Jarrah, imagine that you'd be obliged to leave your house and even to share with you the very same room you live in. This is what's really happening on the ground, and I really don't know. The pain is big. It's so big. And Margo, you've seen this in your own eyes. You've seen what is a segregation wall. You've seen. And that when I went to work, I go to work, I have to It would take me to work, might take me an hour or hour and a half or two, although in reality, it shouldn't be more than 15 minutes because of the checkpoints, because of the barriers, because of the coercive measures they take. And children are on daily basis are being, they're witnessing violence practiced against them, but they cannot really make anything against it, and which will touch their identity, this is irreversible damage on them. So Israel, whatever it does, we still we're striving to be resistant, to maintain our resilience, to maintain our existence against all violations practiced by Israel.
Thank you very much, Fatmeh. And for those of you who have never been to Palestine, the situation is really difficult to imagine. Just the dailiness of living under occupation, as Fatmeh described, going through checkpoints, etc. And there are lots of resources of how to support what's happening. And one way also is to protest, you know, the US government involvement, which is my responsibility as an American, but it would be really helpful also to get pressure from other countries for the US to do the right thing. Right. Okay, are there any other questions, reactions? Because we now want to move to an activity that yesterday we thought was quite fun. We hope you think it will be fun as well. But before I do that, just also responding, this question of men's role has picked up a lot of energy here and responses. So yes, it's important for men to be involved in the liberation of women, but also in a way where they really have to examine their own toxic ways of being masculine, and that for men, it should not be a missionary project where they're rescuing the women, but really thinking about what it means for them to be men and what it means for them, the ways in which they're also dehumanized, you know, so that, and the real question here, I think, is how do we actually rehumanize ourselves? Because of all the ways that everybody on this planet has been dehumanized by capitalism, militarism, you know, and all those things that we've been talking about. And if we rehumanize ourselves, will we also then be better able to protect the planet and to live in harmony with the environment? Right. So that's a kind of a philosophical question. As you may have noticed, Hassanatu had to go to class. She's still a student, so she had to leave us. But we can go with the panelists, and if anyone also, any other people also want to open your mic so we can hear you, if you want to include your comments here, that would be great. So Shebana, let's start with you.
Thank you, Margo. I think just for a closing message, let's together imagine our feminist future. It looks promising, it's intersectional, it's for everyone. Let's put community care at the center. Let's be compassionate. Let's not let our emotions, or maybe we won't be, but let's not argue on things. And well, we can argue on things, but I hope we still put respect and compassion at the center. And it's always coming from a place of love. So looking forward to more conversations. I hope we have more discussions, intergenerational discussions, and that we have music and dancing when we do, so we can celebrate and have fun.
Yeah, thank you. Fatmeh, closing comments, and then Debbie will close with you as we opened with you. So Fatmeh, please.
My closing remark will be linked to this portrait. the most important thing to make a change, a universal change or global change, is to continue on this peaceful and smooth communication. And that's why I've drew this blue lines. It's like water, to be flawless, to make us accept all controversials around the world, or controversies. So, and this is what in the end will lead to us unifying the message, the concerns, the vision. And in my message, I can say that what we feminists should do, we should first of all understand each other and admit that we are also different. We have different backgrounds. And in order to understand each other well, we need to communicate constantly and to accept each other as we are, with the differences that we are in, whether personal differences, differences in norms, attitudes, and religions, and thoughts. This is that will lead us to where we seek to be. This is my message. Margo, you always talk about the love and the importance of love. I would like to say that love at the end of the day will not come if we lost the compass and we lost communication.
Thank you, Fatmeh. And Debbie.
I really believe that the future starts the next moment from now. And in so many ways, the way we work and the way we have been living and talking and visioning is already creating the future. I think that I'm just wondering whether we ever had a record of our conversation, say 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, when we're talking about feminist, a vision of a feminist society in the future. And I think we are lucky and we are very fortunate, despite all the challenges, to live in a time where we can talk about this, but also remembering that who we were and what we were striving for 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 50 years ago, have come to fruition in many respects. That this is a time of massive social transformation, and we should be proud that we have contributed and will continue to contribute to it. And we just need to keep on resisting the attempts to push us backwards.
Mm-hmm. And Debbie, you and I, as the old girls here, I guess we have a long view of things. So you're right. We have seen progress in our time. And of course, progress isn't linear. You know, it goes back and forth sometime. I think the courageous activists like who are on this panel today have nonetheless kept going and kept pushing, and at great risk in many situations. So much appreciation for that. And for this intergenerational moment where we have younger ones and older ones talking and thinking together. Does anybody else want us to hear your voice, and you can actually speak in your language with whatever you have to say before we play our last two songs for dancing? Anybody from our audience, participants? Carla, did you want to make any closing comments before I play the music?
There's S2 Putri Wiluyeng. Maybe I pronounced it wrong. She wants to say something, I think, from the audience.
Yes,
but
please.
Until she's in the speaker mode, I can just say that I really, I saw the comments and how it's getting like kind of heated up and everything, and I really thought that you all closed on a very great mode, and that is that of course we as feminists want to support each other, and it's, for me, there's like nothing worse than if feminists are busy like taking each other apart or something, and I think that really there shouldn't be a lot of space for that. But like I echo Shebana and what she said about community care. I think that is like such an important concept that we need and that we should explore further, and that I feel really inspired by. And today I really felt like it was quite a caring space, and even being half sick, it was nice to be with you guys, and I feel a little better now. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in more events, and follow us on Facebook to see what is up and what's happening. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you. And thank you, Margo. And one last thing that I thought it was so amazing also, now Hassanatu had to leave, but that she joined even though she had like such a challenge with technology as well. And just to to acknowledge that in so many places it's really hard for women and for activists to even get connected to the internet and to even join a panel like this, and to keep that in mind for our future events. Yeah, but thank you so much everyone for coming.